The volume of Russian seaborne oil supplies in the last 4 weeks remained close to a 16-month high, as drone attacks on oil refineries forced the redirection of flows to export terminals and strained their effective capacities, Bloomberg reports. According to vessel tracking data compiled by Bloomberg, the average daily volume of shipments from the country's ports for the 4 weeks ending October 5 was 3.57 million barrels per day, which is approximately 80,000 barrels per day below the maximum value since May 2024. The average figure provides a clearer picture of underlying trends than more volatile weekly figures. The sharp increase in supply volumes occurred amid intensified drone attacks on Russian oil refineries, with at least 15 plants in the European part of Russia being hit in the last 2 months, the publication writes. Among the recent ones is a fire at the Kherson refinery, located more than 800 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. NASA's Fire Information for Resource Management System recorded 2 fires at the site early Saturday morning. This was the second time the plant had been hit in less than a month. According to J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. estimates, due to the strikes, oil refining volumes in Russia fell below 5 million barrels per day, the lowest figure since April 2022. This decline was accompanied by a sharp increase in oil supplies, which grew by approximately 500,000 barrels per day from mid-August over 4 weeks. Russia may not be able to redirect significantly more oil for export if attacks on refineries intensify. Reserve capacities at crude oil export terminals look very limited, the publication states. 2 of the 3 ports most likely to handle barrels from affected refineries, Primorsk on the Baltic and Novorossiysk on the Black Sea, are now close to their capacity ceilings, the publication writes. Although the third port, Ust Luga, also located on the Baltic, reportedly has nominal throughput capacity for increased exports, its supply volumes throughout the year are significantly lower than the peak reached in October 2024. These figures mean that the 3 western ports have only about 165,000 to 265,000 barrels per day of spare capacity, the publication indicates.
Ukraine's leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, has endorsed a strategy of total war aimed at destroying Russia's strategic infrastructure around Moscow. This was reported by the Telegram channel Resident, citing sources in the Ukrainian government. The publication notes that Ukraine hopes to force Russia to the negotiating table. Ukraine believes that the strikes on the oil refineries have served their purpose and drawn the Kremlin into a new wave of escalation, and now it's time to move on to the next stage. Andriy Yermak plans to leave the Russian capital without gas and electricity, which will spark widespread discontent with the war and force the Kremlin to negotiate, says Resident. It's worth noting that Kiev has repeatedly stated preparations for strikes against targets deep within Russia. According to Western media reports, Ukraine is requesting long-range weapons from the US for precisely these purposes. Kiev also periodically presents its own developments. It must be acknowledged that regular strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on oil refineries in Russia have caused considerable inconvenience to Moscow. Refinery productivity has significantly decreased, negatively impacting Russian oil exports. Russian media says that it is highly likely that the West will provide significant assistance to Ukraine in implementing its strategy of total war. Both the US and Europe are of the opinion that only through regular strikes against targets deep within Russia can Kiev force Moscow to the negotiating table. All of this also means the beginning of dark days for Russian President Vladimir Putin, because this is already increasing the dissatisfaction of the population with the government in Russia. Some experts say that the country is falling into rebellion. Recall in September, President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that Ukraine would retaliate against Russia's energy sector if Moscow again attempted to plunge Ukraine into a blackout. Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's power grid, gas facilities and heating systems ahead of winter, aiming to make living conditions unbearable for civilians. Last year, sustained strikes left millions without heat and electricity during freezing temperatures. Since Russia's February 2022 war with its neighbor, each year as winter approaches, Russian forces have blasted Ukraine's power grid. Ukraine says it is an attempt to weaponize winter by denying civilians heat, light, and running water. Russia has recently escalated its strikes on Ukraine's power grid, as well as its rail network, which is essential for military support.
Russia's fuel crisis is worsening amid continued Ukrainian attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure. Once an exporter of oil and gas, Russia is today struggling to meet the domestic demands. Despite the state media's underestimation of the crisis, social media platforms are abundant with reports of nationwide fuel shortage. A video circulated in social media shows a long queue of cars at a gas station in Feodosia in Russian-annexed Crimea against the backdrop of Ukrainian attacks on an oil depot. It should be noted that Crimea has been worse hit by the energy crisis, with almost half of the gas stations in the peninsula reportedly having stopped selling gasoline entirely. Authorities have imposed rationing. The fuel shortage in Russian-held Ukrainian territories have now spread to other regions. Another video footage circulated in social media shows kilometers-long queues at a gasoline station in Russia's border Bryansk region that is suffering severe fuel shortage. According to some reports, only 10% of petrol stations have supply in this region. Another footage released in social media shows 2-kilometer-long line of cars at gas stations along the highway from Moscow to Kazan in Russia's Tatarstan Republic, where supply disruptions are also observed. The fuel shortage exacerbated by Ukraine's long-range attacks on Russia's oil refineries and energy infrastructure have now spread to 20 regions across Russia, including both remote areas such as Far East and more central ones. Many gas stations are rationing fuel, while some stations are closing temporarily due to not receiving supplies. Amid the crisis, gasoline prices have reached record levels, rising sharply throughout the year.